Hi there, my name's April Sawtell and welcome to my channel. Today what I'm going to be doing, I'm just going to do a little tutorial at how to make a 4-patch. So in the last tutorial I did, it was how to make a patchwork quilt. This one, what I did was just really how to make a 4-patch. I'm going to turn it into a quilt that's behind me. I've got some instructions here. If you're interested, I'm going to have it on the screen at some point here, and you can take a screenshot of it. Or if you want to email me in the description box, I'd be happy to send you a PDF of it. It's not an actual pattern. It is only a layout of what I did, how many rows I did, and in the order I did it. It wasn't how much fabric or anything like that. It's very basic instructions. I just thought it might be a little bit helpful. In the end, my quilt top came out to be about 56 by 64. I'm not going to quilt it in this tutorial. I'm just going to show you how to make this quilt top. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. So for today's project, I've got 4 different fabrics that are lights, 4 different fabrics that are darks. I'm going to be using a rotary cutter, scissors, rulers. I've got a calculator here if I need it, and I've got some pins. I've got my BladeSaver because I'm going to be doing an awful lot of chain piecing. I'm going to be doing this with 8.5-inch squares that I've cut out of my yardage. You can do this with a layer cake, a charm pack, a mini charm pack. It really doesn't matter. You can do this any size you want to, depending on how big you want your quilt. The method will be the same no matter what size. So I've got my calculator because I'll be adding as I go because I'm not positive how long I want to make this. I'll know as I go, and I'm going to show you how I'll know that. So you'll know how big to make your quilt. And as far as rulers go, I'm going to be using my 8.5-inch ruler to start with, and then I've got some other rulers here that I'll be using that will be able to, when I go to cut them in half and whatnot. And I've got my big ruler in case I need more squares, and I'll be able to cut my yardage here. I've got my rotary mat here that spins. If you don't have a rotary mat, if you have a smaller mat, just use that and turn it as you go. It'll make it a lot easier for you. Okay, let's get started. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a piece of dark fabric, a piece of light fabric. I'm going to match them up right sides together. I'm going to take a pin. I'm going to put a pin in the middle. That's just going to hold it together. I'm going to line up a bunch of these at one time because I'm going to take them over to my sewing machine to do some chain piecing. So I'm going to do the same thing. I like to put the pin in just to hold it in place while I'm making my move. So one dark, one light. So I've also got some solid colors here that I'm going to be using in between my 4 patches. So it'll go like a 4-patch, plain, 4-patch, plain, 4-patch, plain. So I've got some different colors because I'm going to be experimenting. Border out of my yardage. I've got mine cut down to 5 inches. I'm going to go around my quilt with some border. I do know that. Whatever I don't use is fine. They'll go into my bin where I keep my blocks. They will get used at some point. So I don't mind having them just cut and let me just play around a little bit with them. Okay, I'll see you over the sewing machine and we will sew up some of these pieces to get ready for our 4 patches. I'm over here on my Janome 6700 piece sewing machine, and I've got white thread on the top because my light side, and I've got some black thread on the bottom because it's a dark side. I've got my painter's tape here to my right, and that's just going to be my guide to follow for my 1/4 inch. I'm going to be following the edge of my presser foot here. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down on both sides, and I'm going to just chain piece. So all I'm going to do is just start sewing, following my presser foot and this tape. as I get done, I'm right off the edge of my work. So now I'm just going to grab another piece and I'm just going to put my presser foot right up against, I'm going to put my fabric right up against my needle, lower my presser foot, but I have a little gap here. So this is just going to, it's called chain piecing, and this way I won't waste any thread. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to continue to do this all the way with all of my squares. You just want to come right off, just off your fabric a little bit. You're not really giving any stitches inside of your machine. You're just off the fabric, but enough, it'll leave a little piece of thread there. Just connected all of your pieces. This little piece, you can see my little seam. It's because I had one little piece of this fabric left and I wanted to use it, so I pieced two together to get the size I needed. Chain piecing can make your project go really, really quickly. Okay, when you've got them all done, you can just break your thread and I'll show you the next step. They're all connected now, and all we need to do is break all of the threads. So this little BladeSaver is going to help us do that. You're just going to take your work and you're just going to put it right on top of that blade. Inside of this flower is just a rotary cutting blade, and so it's nice and sharp. And really, you just use an old blade inside of this. It's not even a new blade. Go ahead and take all of your threads off, splitting them all up. And then you can line them up here and you can keep them right in an order. And I'm not really keeping them so much in an order of colors yet. I'm only keeping them in an order of seams. Just so the seams are all going the same way. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my squares, so they're right sides together, and now it's just sewn on each end. I'm going to take that and I'm going to lay it out, and I'm going to take my ruler. All right, so I'm going to cut my block now into 4 1/4 inches. So basically it's just splitting it in half. And I know to stay to my 4 1/4 inch line here. And I'm going to line up the bottom. And I'm going to line up the edges. And I'm going to make sure I'm on 4 1/4. That will cut this block right in half. And I'm also on my rotary mat. I don't quite need the rotary mat yet, but I will be, so I'm going to just stay right on it for now. Okay, all I'm doing is I'm going to cut all of these in half. So the seams are to the right and to the left, and you're going to cut it right directly in half, whatever size you're doing. So now this is what your block is going to look like. Okay, because they've been cut in half. So they're still not square yet. All I'm going to do is I'm going to make a pile. I'm going to keep all of the darks on the top. I'm going to cut through all of my blocks. Remember, the seams are to your left and to your right. Cut mine down to 4 1/4. I'm going to do this to all of mine. I'll keep all of my darks to the top. And I'm going to keep all of my seams to the right, just to make it simple. Okay, take the pen. I'm taking my 4 1/4 inch from the edge to edge. I'm not doing it from the seam. Edge to edge. And then you can take your dark side, put your seams on one side, and put them in your pile. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and take all of my pieces. I'm going to set the seam, always the dark side up. I'm going to open this right up, and I'm just going to glide this right over that. I'm going to do that to all of them. Set the seam, open it, and just glide that. What that's doing, it's making the seam go to the dark side. See how that seam is going right over this dark side? If it goes the other way, we're going to see it through the light color. As long as you always hold your dark fabric face up and iron, open your fabric and iron toward the dark fabric, you will always have the dark side with the seam. Now what we're going to do, I want my blocks to end up like 2 here and 2 here. So in order to do that, we're doing the same thing. We're just taking our block that we just cut. We're going to do opposites. Okay, so the dark will be at the bottom, the light will be at the top. It'll be opposites. All right, you're going to match the seams, and they're going to be all nested together because you sewed everything to the dark side. So now they'll nest perfectly because we flipped it. Put your pin right there in that seam. You want to make sure they're matching up. What you're doing is you're nesting. You can see this little bump here because the seam is coming towards me, and the seam is going towards you on the other side. So they kind of just nest right together. You want these to come out really nice at these seams because it's going to be right here. These two match up and these two match up. You see? The points will all match up together. So by doing what we're doing here, it's going to let them match up there. So nest the seams and put a pin right in that seam. You can feel that right in your fingers too. Okay, put your pin in. And then what we're going to do, we'll just make a pile of these. Totally opposites. Now if you were doing this with scraps or something like that, you don't have to have them matching like this. You could have a totally scrappy look going on in the block. You could have 4 different colors in that block if you wanted to in your 4-patch. This is a real easy way to make a 4-patch. Matching the seams and put your pin right there in the seam. Go over to your sewing machine, put your presser foot down, stay at your 1/4 of an inch following your painter's tape or the side of your presser foot. Go ahead, go through, go right, pull your needle out, go right over your seam, and go all the way to the end. What I would do for the first couple of them, I would just cut the thread for a minute there just to take a peek. Make sure your seams are together here. You can see that mine are. See how they're matching? You just want to make sure your points are touching each other. And you're going to do that to both sides. And you're actually, what we're going to do is we're just going to chain piece. So you just continue on. Once you feel confident that your seams are touching, go ahead and go right straight through all of your pieces, doing the same chain piecing that we did before. Come to your pin, pull out, go all the way down. Oh, So make sure you're always pulled out. That was a close call. My fabric was all tucked up underneath there. All right. Go ahead and break the thread when you come to the end. You've got one whole side done. And now we're just going to move right on to the other side. Go ahead now and cut all of the threads off this side. Now all you've got to do is take your square, line your ruler up, cut it right in half wherever your half point is. Mine is at 4 1/4. Cut it right directly in half. Now it's going to leave us with a 4 patch. Just like that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm just going to press it open. I'll show you how that looks. Now you're just going to take your iron and you can set up a line again with these and you're just going to press them all on one side on the seam. Put your iron right inside and push them right open. It'll just glide right straight through. And that will give you the 4 patch. All right, and you're just going to do this to all of them. Just so if my seam allowance is off anywhere, I'm just going to trim my blocks down to 7.5 inches. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to make my line go right here in the middle. There's a white line on my ruler, and I'm going to put my dot right in the center. And I'm going to trim on all sides. I'm going to use my rotary cutting mat here, as well as my rotary cutter. My rotating cutting mat's going to make my job really simple. I'm going to spin it all the way around and do 2 sides. Spin it all the way around and then do 2 sides. All right. I'm going to do that to all of my blocks. That way, everything will be good and straight. As I'm done each pile, I'll just make another pile of them. All right. Just find your center, line up your dot, and then you can cut 2 sides. Rotate your mat, and now you can do the other 2 sides without moving your fabric. And then you just pick that up, and I gotta trim that right there. Now that's going to be perfectly squared. I'm going to make a pile of those. There's my little scraps that I got off that from trimming all my blocks up. I'm going to start with a solid, then I'm going to go to a 4 patch, then I'm going to go to a solid, then I'm going to go to a 4 patch, and I'm just going to keep playing around with the order until I like how it looks. And then what I'm going to do, once I come up with some sort of an order, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my sewing machine. I'm going to take right sides together. I'm going to take one of these solids and a 4 patch. I'm going to line this up and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down. And I'm going to start making rows. So after I do this one, then I'm going to add another one. 1/4 inch all the way down. Then I'm going to add another one. And I'm just going to keep on doing that all the way around, all the way down until it's as long as I want it. And I'm still not sure how long that's going to be yet. So I'm just going to keep on playing with this until I get some sort of something that I feel is going to work for me. And I'm randomly going to pop in these blacks. Well, maybe not there, but I'll randomly just pop a black in, and I think it's going to give it such a nice pop of color. All right, I'm going to start sewing rows together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the 1/4 of an inch, same stitch all the way down. I'm going to cut that thread right there. I'm not going to chain piece this one. I just want to do big long rows. I'm going to press after the fact. Okay. I'm just going to do this all the way through each row. And I'm going to come back and show you what to do once we have all the rows done. Go ahead and lay them down somewhere while you're working, and then you'll know what your next row needs to look like. If you don't go to the sewing machine all prepared, you can just keep doing it as you go. Now I know the order how I'm going to lay it, so I want to make sure I don't get confused at this order. So all I do is just write it down on a piece of scrap paper, put a pin in it, and put it on the left side of every piece. That will keep me right in order. Now that I've got all the pieces labeled, all I need to do now is I need to lay the seams in one direction because I'm going to be nesting each seam here as I go. So with number 1, I'm going to start and I'm going to push the seams all to the right. I've got steam in my iron, and I'm just going to push the seam, all of them, right to the right. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, this one's ready to go. I'll set this over here. So row 2, I'm going to do all of the seams to the left. So all you're going to do now, when you open this, you're going to see row 1, left-hand side. So we know row 1 left top. So now let's just get this under the presser foot, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so there's my row 1 that will be on my right. When I open it, then when I go like this, it's always at my top. I'm going to stick this under my presser foot. I'm going to just give it a couple of stitches, and I'm going to line myself up here. I need to match seams again. So what I'm going to do it right from that angle. I am going to match my seams. So when you get started, make sure you put your seams together and nest them. Put a pin right in there. As we did earlier, I showed you how to do that earlier. Just put your pin in. You want this first one to get off to a really good start, because it's going to line them up for the as you go. All right, I'm going to come right over this. So I'm going to pull my pin out and hold that with my finger. And now I'm going to take a look. Okay. So you can see my points are matching here. It's pretty important that the first few here to just make sure you're on. It's easier to fix it now than have to pull it apart. And as a beginner, if you're a beginner quilter, you might want to look, after each seam to make sure you are on. It does take practice though, so it's going to take a while before you really are, really matching, and that's okay. Just go with it. What you're really looking for is to make sure you're just getting in the, time and experience. So each time you do it, you're getting better and better. So don't worry if it's not right on, and you don't need to pull it all apart. Just keep going, and you're going to have a beautiful finished quilt when you're done. All right, I'm going to go to the next seam. Okay, I'm at my pin. I'm going to go right, hold my finger here, and go right through. And I'll look at that again. Okay, that looks great. So that is true. If you look when you're really this close to the edge here, it's so easy to fix it if you did want to, versus waiting until you've got the whole row done. If you're watching my videos, you'll see that I am not a perfectionist, and I try not to show you how to be a perfectionist. I just feel like a finished quilt is the best quilt. So now I'm not going to use pins. All I'm going to do is hold it. I'm going to hold it right where I've nested that seam. Pins are such a preference. I love pinning, because sometimes the pins just kind of make it a little complicated for me when I'm on those long stretches. All right, I'm going to break thread there. Okay, here's row 3. I can take that pin off. If you have a hard time matching the seams and they're just not matching up, one thing you could try to do is, when you match your seam and you've got them nested, instead of sewing all of this now, just break your thread, lift your presser foot, match up your seam. So go ahead, match that seam up, and then just put it under the machine and sew just over the seam. Don't worry about the other stuff on each side. We'll come back to that. Lower your presser foot and give it a couple of stitches just over your seam. And then go ahead, take a look at it. See where we're at here. So this part I have not sewn yet. And I decided just to go do the seam. So I sewed the seam. And there it is, and it's the points are matching perfectly. See that? So now what we'll do, we'll just go back to the sewing. So then just straighten yourself up. Go back to where you left off, a little bit above it, so you get some extra stitches. And just start. Now see how your seam is already sewn there? And then just come down to it. And go right over that. And you already know that's straight. Then you can do the same thing. Line them up to the next seam. Hold it. Go a little ways. Break your thread. Go right into that seam. You know it's nested. You've done that. Go over it. Check your work again. Make sure it has, in fact, gone on the points. Okay, let's see here. And you can see right here that it has. See, I didn't sew any of that, and I haven't sewn below it, so it's just this big gap, but you know your seams will match. And then go back to your work and continue to do that all the way through your quilt. And then you will, it's just going to give you experience at matching those seams up. If you're struggling with keeping them points together, try doing that. That might be helpful. And then just continue on sewing the rest of the way. Okay, so now I've got all of my rows put on. I'm going to take it over and I'm going to press it super flat. After that, you just take a ruler, you fold your quilt in half, and you're just going to line your ruler up along the edges here. And all I'm looking for is any overhang. So I have my starting point. That's like a lowest point here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim all of that off. I'm going to go all the way around the quilt. I am going to leave the quilt right in half though. And that way I'm only just touching on these edges. I shouldn't have too much overhang. But I want this pretty squared when I go to put my trim on. So I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to do that all the way around the quilt. Put all my rows together on my quilt top. So now I just need to attach my border. So I know my first row because I still have my label on that. So I know that's my top left of my quilt top. So that's going to stay right here to my left at the top still. That was the only one I left the label on. I'm going to go over here to my top right. I'm going to take my 5-inch border that I made and I'm just going to put it right sides together, right here on the edge. There's nothing to match up. And I'm just going to sew one on each side. And then I'm going to do the top and the bottom. Just do the same thing, 1/4 inch, and just start sewing. And there's no seams, so you should be able to glide right through this part. Now I'm just going to take and snip off any loose threads I have, and I'm going to give it one more press to flatten this right out before I get ready to, quilt it and make a sandwich out of it. And my quilt top is finished. I hope you enjoy this tutorial. If you do, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Remember to keep it simple. Thanks for watching. Bye.